Hare Krishna. Krishna. So we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 14, verse number 42. But before we chant, we recite the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Diti Ruvacha Vadam Bhagavata Shakshat Sunabodhara Bahuna Ashashe Putrayor Mayam Ma Krudahat Brahmanat Prabhu Diti Ruvacha Badam Bhagavata Shakshat Sunabodhara Bahuna Ashashe Putrayor Mayam Ma Krudahat Brahmanat Prabhu Diti Ruvacha Vadam Bhagavata Shakshat Sunabodhara Bahuna Ashashe Putrayor Mayam Ma Krudat Brahmanat Prabhu Bhagavata Shakshat Sunabodhara Bahuna Ashashe Putrayor Mayam Ma Krudat Brahmanat Prabhu Titi Ruvacha Bhagavata Shakshat Sunabodhara Bahuna Ashashe Putrayor Mayam Brahmanat Prabhu Titi Ruvacha Vadam Bhagavatam Shakshat Udara Bahuna Ashashe Putrayor Mayam Makrudahamana Prabhu Iti Ruvacha Vadam Bhagavata Shakshat Sunabodhara Bahuna Ashe Putrayor Mayam Makrudahat Bhavamnano. Iti Ruvacha Vadam Bhagavata Shakshat Sunabodhara Bahuna Ashashe Putrayor Mayam Ma Krudan Brahmana Prabhu Titi Ruvacha Vadam Bhagavata Shakshat Sunabodhara Bhavana Ashashe Putrayor Mayam Ma Krudat Brahmana Prabhu. Word for word translation. Diti Uvacha. Diti said. Vadaham, the killing. Bhagavata, by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sakshat, directly. Sunabha, with a Sudarshan weapon. Udara, very magnanimous. Bahuna, by the arms. Ashashe, I desire. Putrayo, of the sons. Mayam, of mine. Ma, never be it so. Krudat, by the rage. Brahmanat, of the Brahmanas. Prabhu, O my husband. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Abhay Chandra Ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. Diti said, "It is very good that my sons will be magnanimously killed by the arms of the personality of Godhead with his Sudarshan weapon. O my husband, may they never be killed by the wrath of the Brahmana devotees." Purport. When Diti heard from her husband that the great souls would be angered by the activities of her sons, she was very anxious. She thought that her sons might be killed by the wrath of the Brahmanas. The Lord does not appear when the Brahmanas become angry at someone, because the wrath of a Brahmana is sufficient in itself. He certainly appears, however, when his devotee simply becomes sorry. A devotee of the Lord never prays to the Lord to appear for the sake of the troubles the miscreants cause for him. And he never bothers him by asking for protection. Rather, the Lord is anxious to give protection to the devotees. Diti knew well that the killing of her sons by the Lord would also be his mercy. And therefore she says that the wheel and arms of the Lord are magnanimous. If someone is killed by the wheel of the Lord and is thus fortunate enough to see the arms of the Lord, that is sufficient for his liberation. Such good fortune is not achieved even by the great sages. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatirubhascha Kripa Sindhuba Evacha Titanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna. Thank you everyone for coming to the morning Bhagavatam class. As I'm sitting here in this August assembly of devotees, please bless me so that I can say something in glorification of Lord Shri Radha Gopinath, and also following in the footsteps of our Acharyas and our Guru Parampara. So I'll read the translation again, text 42. Diti said, "It is very good that my sons will be magnanimously killed by the arm of the personality of Godhead with a Sudarshan weapon. O my husband, may they never be killed by the wrath of the Brahmana devotees." So Kashyapa gives his verdict on what's about to happen, and here we see Diti is responding to him. And you can see the culture of Diti, that how, and obviously how intelligent and how well learned she is. That she's not rationalizing, she's not, trying to defend herself. Oh, actually, this is what I asked for and this is what I'm getting. She knows very well that what she's actually getting is actually the mercy of the Lord. In fact, I was reading through the following verses, and obviously Prabhupada, in one of the purports, he writes in the end that the word Prabhupada uses there is that Diti was pleased beyond expectation, because she's told that actually one of the boons, or one of the result that you'll be getting is that one of your future grandsons will be a great devotee of the Lord, which is Prahlad Maharaj. So she is jubilant when she hears that, and she understands that whatever the Lord does is actually for the good of everyone. So famous verse we hear in the Bhagavad Gita, Janma karma cha me divyam evam yoveti tattvataha taktva deham punarjanma naiti mameti. So Arjuna, one who knows the transcendental nature of my birth and activities does not return to this material world. So again, at least I see for myself as a practicing sadhaka, a lot of time when we're in the practicing stages of devotional service, quite often when we are practicing, we want a peaceful life. We don't want any, we want everything to be, our externals should be peaceful, which is again, that if there's stability in our external circumstances, that obviously helps in our bhakti. But you read prayers of great devotees, especially Queen Kunti. In the first canto, she says, when all that's happened and Krishna, when they're finally reinstated to their kingdom and Krishna is about to leave, she offers beautiful prayers to Krishna, and in that she said, "Oh Krishna, we went through so many dangers," and Prabhupada writes in that purport that Devaki was only threatened, and she went through all of that with Kamsa only once. But here you see Kunti, Queen Kunti, and her sons. She was widowed at a young age. She had to. Bhima was fed a poison cake. The house was set on fire. Draupadi went through so much. And Arjuna, they had to fight. Arjuna had to face his own superiors and his worshipful elders in that fight. And after saying all this, what did she tell Krishna? Krishna, may those calamities come again and again. How would, at least I see for myself, what would I be asking Gopinath in that situation? It would. So you see the consciousness and the purity and, obviously the character of such souls, and they're examples for us to follow. So, on a similar note, we find in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a story of Shivananda Sen. How Shivananda Sen is actually responsible of arranging the travels for the devotees from Bengal to Jagannath Puri, and now he's arranging for the tolls to be paid. He's arranging for the residences of the devotees to do, for them to. And it just happened on one instance that there was some complication, and he had to stay behind to sort out certain issues with the toll booths. And as that happened, the devotees passed through, and then they go to, I believe they enter Jagannath Puri, and they're just sitting under a tree because the residence has to be organized by Shivananda Sen, and Shivananda Sen's not there. And Nityananda Prabhu, obviously as we understand, he's an avaduta, but again, he acts in a way which to mundane people seems contradictory, but again, his activities cannot be understood by common men. He gets angry and he says, Shivananda Sen, he's responsible for all of our affairs. And here I am sitting under a tree. I'm hungry and I don't have a residence. I curse for his 3 sons to die. And at that time, Shivananda Sen's wife is there and she hears it. She's like, oh my God, what just happened? And Shivananda Sen finally catches up. He comes to the party and then he sees his wife there and his wife is just crying, we've been cursed. Our sons have been cursed to die by Nityananda Prabhu. And Shivananda Sen is like, you crazy woman. Don't you understand the great mercy that we're getting from Nityananda Prabhu? And this is just a small price to pay for the inconvenience I've caused Nityananda Prabhu. And for this, he goes and falls at Nityananda Prabhu's feet. And what does Nityananda Prabhu do? He kicks him. It's, someone would expect Nityananda Prabhu would just pick him up and just like, oh, it's okay, bygones be bygones, but he kicks him. And Shivananda Sen is just ecstatic, like, today you bestowed mercy by punishing me for my offenses, which were rightly deserved. And he just is having tears of gratitude. And then Nityananda Prabhu just embraces him, and there they go. And then there he is. Nityananda Prabhu is, Shivananda Sen is ecstatic, and he goes and tells his wife, and they all are quite jubilant on what's happened. At that time, the nephew of Shivananda Sen, Srikanta Sena, gets a bit upset, seeing all of this. He's like, something doesn't settle with me. Nityananda Prabhu acting in such a way, and he goes and lodges a complaint he goes to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then I believe it's Swarup Damodar, they're telling, he's trying to, to pacify Srikanta Sena, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, obviously being omniscient, knows what's happening, and he said, just let him, he's in a disturbed state of mind, let's not, just let him come and, be with me. So we see in this pastime too, in this pastime of Nityananda Prabhu cursing Shivananda Sen, his sons to die, that he takes it as mercy, he takes it as the blessing. Again, we see in this, there's a very famous story in the Ramayana. There's a story of Maricha, one of the demons. And this demon is asked, so as the story goes, Maricha was, when Ram and Lakshmana were asked by Vishwamitra to accompany them to the forest, wherein Vishwamitra was to organize a big fire sacrifice, but the demons kept interrupting it, so he needed some protection, so he appealed to Dashrath to give his sons. So Ram and Lakshmana accompany Vishwamitra, and they fight with these demons, and Maricha happened to be one of them. And as soon as Ram's arrow hits the chest of Maricha, he's plunged thousands of feet, just beyond where he was at. And then at that moment, he actually has a change of heart, and he understands that Ram is actually God, the Supreme Personality of God had come for enactment of his pastimes. And as he has a change of heart, he gives up his demoniac duties, and he just sits and meditates, and he's worshipping the Lord, just in his own way, just trying to atone for his sins. But as it happens, Ravana approaches him much later, asking him to participate in his demoniac activities, and he tells Maricha that, please cooperate with me, I need to kidnap Sita. And at that time, Maricha tries to counsel Ravana, saying that you don't know Ram, just leave him alone. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead here, trying to, don't ever mess with him. So he tries to explain to Ravana, but Ravana doesn't give any. He's like, I came here to ask you for help, not to ask for your suggestions. So it's better you stick to what I have to do, or else I'm going to kill you. So that time, Marich realizes that he has no other way other than, if he doesn't, he has two choices: whether to be killed by Ravana, to which he wouldn't know where his future destination is, or to be killed by Ram, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which will assure him of, achieving liberation. So at that point in time, he takes to, he at least externally agrees to the plan set by Ravana, and then he takes the form of a deer and he lures Sita by his voice, and then Ram eventually kills him with his arrow, and then he achieves liberation. So Maricha, even though being a demon, understood that being killed by the Lord is far more auspicious and desirable than being killed by Ravana. So that's another pastime. And then we see there's a few points being mentioned here in this purport, which are actually quite interesting, where Diti says, she thought that her sons might be killed by the wrath of the Brahmanas. The Lord does not appear when the Brahmanas become angry at someone, because the wrath of a Brahmana is sufficient in itself. He certainly appears, however, when his devotee simply becomes sorry. A devotee of the Lord never prays to the Lord to appear for the sake of the troubles the miscreants cause for him, and he never bothers him by asking for protection. Rather, the Lord is anxious to give protection to the devotees. So, just to repeat here, he certainly appears, however, when his devotee simply becomes sorry. So, we see in the life of Advaita Acharya, even though he's Mahavishnu himself, he could have delivered the entire creation, but he feels sorry for the conditioned souls, because he sees how how Navadvip has become a center of just dry, philosophical speculation. So he feels sorry. Similarly, in the pastime of Nalakuvera and Manigriva, Narada Muni, when he sees the two boys acting out of whack, he sees it's not that he's like what he's contemplating on now, not how am I gonna look at these guys, they've been so disrespectful to me, let me show them my Brahma Tejas, let me show them what I'm capable of. Rather, he's feeling sorry. He's saying, look at these two boys, they've been blessed with such good parentage, such opulence, such beauty, and they are learned, but look at how they're acting. So let me try to devise a means by which they'll be able to come to their senses. So he takes, he obviously, as a result of their curse, they lose all of their opulence, and then they're rather taking the form of trees. But in disguise, what they actually get is that they've been given a benediction that in the future, at some point in time, in a few thousand years, at least during the Dwapara Yuga, they'll have the darshan of the Supreme Lord himself. So even the words of a pure devotee, they never go in vain. So Krishna is more anxious to fulfill the words and the promise given by a devotee rather than he himself. I remember, and obviously Diti here is very anxious because she knows that her sons are going to cause trouble to, as we read in the preceding verses, to the saintly people, to women and to others. And she's very scared of the wrath of the Brahmanas. I mean, in the Bhagavatam we see both sides, and we see some Brahmanas being angered at very little things. We see the story of Durvasa Muni. But again, the context and from which we take is not to anger, or not to at least offend devotees of the Lord, because that causes all misfortune. And she understands that making offenses to the Brahmanas, or in this context the devotees, really causes that mercy to not come to that individual. So mercy, as we understand, is a descending process, because it comes to the Vaishnavas, and the moment there is an obstruction to that, then that causes havoc in our spiritual life. So she understands that. I was once hearing, I can't remember who this devotee was, but he was saying that he was with this, I can't remember if it was Tamal Krishna Maharaj or Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, that the moment they saw on the TV that during the Cold War, when we had this fall of when we had the Soviets controlling, and obviously, I believe someone saw on the TV, one of these devotees saw on the TV that the army or certain leaders were actually prosecuting devotees and causing pain to the devotees. At this very moment they said, that's it, that's the fall of this empire, because the moment they started attacking devotees, that was it. That even though the Soviets, who were at that time, invincible, it actually from there on it was a downward spiral. So once my Guru Maharaj was asked this question, I believe he had a traveling Sankirtan party and in his ashram, and they were asking him, Maharaj, what advice would you want to give to us? I believe it was a mix of brahmacharis and some other grihastha devotees that were traveling with him. What advice would you give us so that we'll remain strong in our Krishna consciousness? And obviously, how can we always further our distribution of books and strong in our service? And Maharaj said that he recalled an incident of him with Srila Prabhupada, where Srila Prabhupada was giving an instruction that how do you not fall down from your position. And Prabhupada said that always have good relationships with each other, always have a cooperative mood with each other. And he said that served, he could now see, or he was contemplating on it, he was meditating on it, that the very moment we start making offenses to devotees, we are overcome, or at least gradually, or in whatever proportion it is, that we are overcome by material desires. Material desires start, flooding us, and we start seeing, at least we, try to place greater emphasis on a desire of not pleasing Krishna and on some other things. So for example, he was saying, we may be fixated on our determination in one particular service, but the moment, and it happens at times because of a conditioned nature, sometimes we make some offenses that we get distracted and say, oh, maybe, we should do it this way, even though we had that resolute determination. So having good relationships, what he said to them was actually the key in our smooth sailing, in our Krishna consciousness. So another story that comes to mind in the Bhagavatam was, in my own reading, I'm reading the pastime of Chitraketu Maharaj. Obviously it follows on from the killing of the demon Vritrasura by Indra. And in that pastime we see that Vritrasura kills two brahmanas. The first one is Vishwarup, who is performing fire sacrifices for Indra, but it just so happens that he's more inclined towards the demons, and he obviously gives a share of it to the demons, or he gives the mantra to the demons. I can't remember the exact specifics. So Indra ends up killing him, and as a result of that, what it results in is the birth of Vritrasura. Just very powerful demon. It's in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam for any of you that like to refer to it. And Vritrasura is actually Chitraketu from his previous life, and Vritrasura, even though he's in a demoniac body, but his heart is of a devotee, and he's telling Indra, when they're fighting when they're having this one-on-one battle, Indra becomes, he's losing that will to fight, and Vritrasura tells him, why don't you kill me? It's a duty. And he says, Vritrasura speaks of such transcendental philosophy that Indra is stunned, like, who is this? Who am I fighting against? Is this a devotee or a demigod or a demon? So Vritrasura then, obviously, Indra is been given the mantra by which he'll be able to kill Vritrasura, and he kills Vritrasura and he becomes morose. He's just sitting there. Because all the demigods wanted him to kill Vritrasura, so all the demigods are happy, and Vritrasura is just sitting there. Oh my God, what did I just do? He's just, just trying to understand how can he atone, or how can he compensate for what's just happened? And he realizes that, and one of the offenses in a chanting of the holy name is to chant Hare Krishna on the strength of committing offenses. So at first the brahmanas tell him, you've been given this mantra, you go kill him. So in one sense, it's the similar offense that what we read every morning. So he's thinking what to do, and as he's thinking of all the sinful reactions that are going to come to him. And at that time, the personification of sinful reaction is actually following him everywhere, and he's just so frightened by it that he is just running here and there. And at that time, there's a personality named Nahusha who gets reinstated in the position of Indra to take over the affairs while Indra is trying to sort out his sinful reactions. He's saying, okay, I got to take care of some urgent business, you take care of the affairs in the heavenly kingdom. So Indra then, the brahmanas or the demigods, I can't remember who, tell him that since you've done this act, you can atone for this by performing a horse sacrifice. And that's where that comes from, that the mood for us shouldn't be that we chant on the strength of committing offenses. But they said that first you need to take on these sinful reactions, and only after you're sufficiently purified, can you then actually perform a horse sacrifice. So he sits there, and then finally he ends up going to Manas Sarovar, and he goes underwater for 1,000 years in the stem of the lotus that is inhabited by the goddess of fortune, Lakshmi Devi. And it is said that he was protected by Rudra Deva, and because he was strictly worshipping Vishnu, eventually after 1,000 years, he was able to overcome all of those sinful reactions. He was sufficiently purified, and then he comes out, and then obviously Nahusa does something that's quite abominable, and then he does the Ashwamedha Yajna, and there he's reinstated back in his position. So, wrath of the Brahmanas is what is most feared by Diti, and she says, what I've been given is way beyond my expectations. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is going to come and kill my sons. What better can I ask for? So, that to her is far better than being killed by the wrath of the Brahmana devotees. Now, I was listening there was a question that was once asked to Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, that are Brahmanas so sensitive, or is it their ego? That you find, obviously in the Bhagavatam, you find Durvasa Muni, he just gets angered at any little thing. And he said that the way he described it was, obviously there are two sides to it. It's not only they're sensitive, or it's their ego that's being hurt, but we need to understand that the way he described it it's actually much more subtle. For example, in the Shastras, capital punishment is ascribed to Shudras, but not for Brahmanas. So Brahmana is not meant to undergo capital punishment. And he was describing that it depends on the degree of consciousness of that person. So, he was quoting a very famous Hindi verse, but a Hindi slogan that people use quite a lot in just common folklore, that those that need to be, I'll try to translate it, but those that can be chastised by their hands and fists do not need to be explained to by words. For example, if someone deserves capital punishment, you can't sit and reason there with him. You can't explain to them by words. So, for example, with Ashwatthama, he's a Brahmana. What was his punishment? He was just his punishment wasn't he wasn't killed physically, but he was given a punishment that was suited to his disposition. So, a lot of times, with a Brahmana, because they are more intellectual, they can be convinced or they can be persuaded. So for them, Shastra is their astra. That's their weapon. So through the weapon of true Shastra, they can be the punishment that's to be given to them is basically through intellectual reasoning. So even though the Bhagavatam does, so for example, a Brahmana may pick up, or if someone is very sensitive, may be able to pick up certain sensitive, I may say something and they may pick up, certain fine, as they say, we read through the fine print, so they'll be reading through the fine print. So in one sense, that actually, because Brahmanas are intellectual, one of the tendencies that can come is that we become overly intellectual, overly analytical, and just seeing through the words, and that can also work to our disadvantage. So obviously, like I said, we are given the instance of Durvasa Muni, again, to just highlight a point that how we have to be careful and vigilant, but at the same time, when our sensitivity is not regulated properly, then that can lead to, problems where we see here that, for example, if a Brahmana curses someone, then that becomes, an issue. But again, also we see in the first canto where the Brahmana boy Shringi curses Maharaj Parikshit, obviously, but that caused the Bhagavatam to manifest. So I remember, I think on Sunday, I think it was you, last month, you asking Nrsimha Kavash Prabhu that we see people getting angry, or we see instances in the Bhagavatam where someone is acting in such a way. So what does it take for us? And Nrsimha Kavash Prabhu mentioned that when personalities in the Bhagavatam become angry, or when they act what to us is unreasonable, it causes the Bhagavatam to manifest. It causes Prahlad Maharaj to come. So that's the difference between these pure souls, or these souls who are associations of the Lord, and us who are conditioned by nature and are trying to get purified. So what will follow in the following verses is the glories of Prahlad Maharaj, just a very short summary of it, of what's going to happen, and obviously this will make Diti quite jubilant in what she was expecting. So we look forward to that. I'll stop you if anyone has any questions or comments, reflections. Yes. Yeah, good question. So the question is, does being sorry or feeling remorse enough? So a mundane example, but then I'll try to at least touch on it from the Bhagavatam point of view. A few years ago, one person that I knew was having some sort of legal trouble, and this person went to his lawyer, and the lawyer said that you need to express remorse in your application, or as you're writing to the judge, you need to express how much remorse you feel, and that will obviously show the judge that you are actually feeling guilty of what you've done. But in addition to that, you need to show what have you done to fix it. That was in the mundane example. But in the Bhagavatam, we also see that, like for example, Indra, he felt remorse. He felt, he feels that he was feeling quite condemned with what he's done. What does he do is that what was appropriate for him is to go, and actually he took on those, the sinful, it wasn't that he wasn't affected by the sinful reaction, but he was taken away from his position, and he went to the Manasarovar lake for 1,000 years and performed tapasya, performed meditation, and was actually, the verse itself actually says strictly worshipping Vishnu. So, at least in our case, it is that, if we feel sorry, we feel remorse, we take actions to, at least in whatever, we consult with devotees, with whatever is appropriate for us to perform certain actions that will help us overcome that remorse. But then we also really follow the principles that have been laid out in our execution devotion service to help us better. If a person, another devotee, yep. Mhm. 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 Mercy stops, yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, like I said, in that case with Indra, he was advised by the Brahmanas to do so. But in this instance, I don't know, from what I've at least seen in practical applications, if such a situation ever occurs, then you can always go to a, if that person feels sorry and remorseful, then maybe go to a third person and try to, sometimes mediation can, also be a bit challenging, but try to take practical steps to resolve it on their own. And then again, it can always be challenging, but that's what, like you said in the example of Sanatan Goswami, he directly went to that person. So, yes, Prabhu. Elevated? Yes. Yes. Yesterday, I was listening to class by Ramapada Swami on this verse, and he alluded to that. Yep, it actually refers, in our context, it refers to the Brahmana Vaishnava devotees. That's what, Maharaj was saying, and I was just following along with him. Yeah? Yep. Mm-hmm. 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 So, I can't remember exactly with Nalagrova, Manigreva and Nalukuvera exactly what did the Lord tell them, but if I remember correctly, either Narada Muni or Krishna tells him that you'll never forget me. If I remember correctly, I don't know the last bit of it, but he says you'll never forget me. Um, and with Vidura, he goes back as he's Yamaraj. He's one of the 12 Mahajans. So that's how I would understand it. Yes, Prabhu? Nrsimha Prabhu? Yep. Yeah, so your material desires, the example that I had given, or maybe I didn't elaborate on, was, for example, if I'm fixated on if I have a particular service that's given, and that service is my goal, or my offering to obviously Srila Prabhupada, my spiritual master, or whatever. So when we make offenses, then we, rather than appreciating, we can be distracted. That's what I was saying. Instead of material desire, so basically we overcome a material desire. So, well, I don't know if the example is appropriate or not, but I'd once heard this, and I can't remember who this person is. Obviously, I won't quote this person. Was that This one personality, he was actually quite a prominent um, personality within the movement in Srila Prabhupada's time. And later on, again, I can't remember the details, but because of some offenses, either to Srila Prabhupada directly or to one of the devotees, I can't remember the exact details, he went away from Krishna consciousness and actually became sort of like a yoga guru, advocating, mode of goodness kind of living and just, just keeping whoever, and he actually had a lot of followers and quite prominent. He was very, very popular, and even I remember someone telling me this, like up until a few years ago, that person was still alive and had a lot of followers, but it's not. He wasn't taking them to pure devotional service or taking them to Srila Prabhupada. It was had them at the mode of goodness. So that's one example that I could think of. Or, for example, it can also be that we just stray away from the instructions of a spiritual master or from the instructions from higher authorities. We end up start speculating. Oh, maybe, yeah, that's true. That could work, but I think this is probably the right way. So, with material desires, I think from what at least in my speculation, from what I understood from Maharaj, we just get distracted. Other question? Havoc, yep. Oh, the eighth canto, right? Pumsavana ceremony, something. Anyway, I can't. Yeah, sixth. I think you're right, sixth. Yeah. Mm. I haven't got into that chapter from what I remember exactly. I know, when I was reading through the Pasam of Chitraketu, and that's coming up. I haven't, but if anyone else would like to add to that, if she's forgotten. Mm. Mm. Bhakti-mama. Thankful. Mhm. Mhm. Thank you, Prabhu. Mm-hmm. Mm. Um, I'm just following whatever Guru Parampara has. Yes, Prabhu. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you. Thank you. Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.